фестивалийн Welcome.
Сайн байцгаана уу хүнд үзэгчдээ. Өнөөдөр орой манай дефакто нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Бээжингийн Олон улсын бизнес ба эдийн засгийн их сургуулийн доктор, профессор мөн Хятадын антимонополийн зохицуулалтын мэрэгжилтэн ноён Жон Гонг оролцож байна.
Доктор Жон Гонг нь олон улсын бизнес болон эдийн засгийн их сургуульд эдийн засгийн дэд профессороор ажилладаг бөгөөд тэрээр микро эдийн засаг, салбарын эдийн засаг, үйл итгэлцлийн ба эдийн засгийн эрхзүй болон олон улсын худалдаа гэх хичээлүүдийг тус заадаг төдийгүй судалгааны ажил явуулдаг юм. Тэрээр Их Британд хэвлэгддэг Хятадын эдийн засаг болон гадаад худалдаа сэтгүүлийн гүйцэтгэх редактор юм. Доктор Гонг нь үйл итгэлцлийн удирдлагаараа Хятадд алдартай төдийгүй дэлхийд тэргүүлэгч эдийн засгийн зөвлөх компани болох Калифорни мужийн Эмервилд байрладаг Competition Economics хувьцаат хариуцлагатай компанид судлаачаар ажилладаг юм. Олон улсын бизнес болон эдийн засгийн их сургуульд ажиллахаас өмнө тэрээр Колорадо мужид орших кабель телевизэн лабораторис хувьцаат хариуцлагатай компанийн төлөвлөлтийн үнэлгээн дээр ахлах зөвлөхөөр ажиллаж байсан бөгөөд тухайн үедээ доктор Гонг нь кабелийн телевизийн салбарт удирдлагын зөвлөгөө өгөх туршлагыг хэрэгжүүлж байжээ. Тэрээр докторийн зэрэгээ 1995 онд Остин дахь Техас их сургуульд хамгаалжээ.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me here.
Well, it's a great pleasure. You have been speaking at the Economic Club of Ulaanbaatar.
Right.
And what brought you there?
Well, what happened is I taught a regular course to a lot of foreign government officials sponsored by the Chinese government to visit China. One of the students in that class is from Mongolia. It's actually from the Silk Road Foundation, and later on, she contacted me. We're having this monthly event at the Economics Club, and said if I'm interested in coming. I said, sure, of course, why not? So that brought
Silk
me
Road
here.
Foundation is a father of Economic Club of Ulaanbaatar, and
right.
we have that traditions
Right,
inviting professors, scientists from
Right.
other countries.
Yeah.
Other our neighbor countries or third neighbor countries, how we call it, and you are the first Chinese professor to speak.
I feel honored. I really feel honored.
Thank you very much for that. Let's talk about, you have been mentioning about the two pillars of Chinese economics development.
Right.
Please tell us about that.
I think one is the transition towards a market-oriented economy, which is very important, right? I think China did a very good job in that aspect through the last 20 some years, barring a few strategic industries, usually like upstream industries. Most of the industry sectors in China have been open to competition. The state pretty much withdrew from these very competitive industries. So these industries are dominated by private enterprises. They're very competitive. Profit margins is notoriously low in China, right? Mm-hmm. So this is what's happening for a long time. But I think I want to add a note, though, that there's still room for further making these state-dominated sectors more competitive. I'm not advocating privatizing these state-owned companies. I'm just saying that we should introduce more competition to these sectors, adopt the principle of competitive neutrality, treat private companies and state-owned companies as equals, okay? And I think just by doing that, we can squeeze out some productivity gain that can be contribute to China's GDP growth, okay? So I think productivity growth can come from competition agenda itself.
Including from state-owned enterprises?
Including from state-owned companies, absolutely.
In particular sectors, Chinese government is still in,
right?
And the remaining you have liberalized it,
right?
And still you have competition. Mm-hmm. In Mongolia, we believe many countries usually state-owned enterprise are usually not very productive, inefficient. And how do you manage that part?
Well, I mean, state-owned companies need competition to make it more productive, make it more efficient. So, I think in certain industries, for example, the oil and gas industry has been dominated by these 3 oil companies in China. And if you think about it, such a large market, right? 1.3 billion people, so many cars in the market today, only 3 oil and gas companies. I don't think that's right. I think there's no reason for not opening up to private investment, gas stations. What's the rationale behind owning having the gasoline service station to be a monopoly or duopoly, right? I mean, there's no economy of scale in these industries. There's no reason for a natural monopoly type of argument here. So it should be open to private enterprises, I think.
So you expect this sector also will be open to private sectors?
Well, I hope they will. I think the central government right now understands it, but as you know, for things to change in that drastically, you need some time, and also, the traditional way of doing things in China is always a evolutionary approach. We do things by try and error, gradually. I think that's the right strategy, and I'm all for it.
Okay. Second, you mentioned about the role of foreign direct investment and free trade.
Trade and foreign direct investments, they're kind of related. I think that plays a very, very important role in China, in driving China's growth. As I mentioned in the speech yesterday, 30 to 40% of China's GDP are accounted for by the export sector. And out of this, a large percentage, up to like 60% of the exports actually is initiated or driven by multinational companies.
So 30% of economy and 60% of the
exports. Yeah.
Yet you see that nowadays we have seen certain wages, protests, boycott, and people from the beginning are not very happy. For example, you have mentioning that $300 iPhone, but only $10 staying in China, and you are still surviving. Why?
Well, I guess it's all because of competition. People need that $10 value added to survive. Right. Otherwise, $10 of value added is better than nothing. Right. So, we Chinese care about these things, and we will still want to, make money, even though it's kind of a meager profit margin. But more importantly, it's a step to the next level. Right. Without that humble experience of them, making that $10, we would have never even dreamed of taking a larger share of the Apple iPhone total value of $300 or $400. Okay.
So you start from small and go up.
Right. If you never have the first step, you can never get to the next level.
Even it's very expensive. Then you go ahead. And you were also mentioning that because that foreign direct investment, though you are having only $10 from $300, you still manage to learn how this whole thing is done.
Right. Absolutely. There's a technology, what's called technology spillover. There's something called, in economics we call it backward linkage effect, that people used to work for these multinational companies. Now they probably moved to an indigenous company. They brought wisdom, technology, know-how, and management skills. They probably will start on its own, funded by venture capitals. Many cases like that.
No, you have now owned iPhones.
Yeah. So, perfect example is a phone company by the name of Xiaomi. People call it China's version of Apple. Okay. These people, they started on their own and extremely successful.
Because they know how to produce phones.
People they hire have been in this business before, right? They know what vendors to find, what are good products from different vendors, how to put software into the chips.
They have this know-how.
Exactly. So this is the technology spillover. You
were mentioning in the same manner automobile industry.
Exactly.
Please tell us.
Well, automobile industry, is kind of a controversial subject in China. There's a lot of debate about whether it's worthwhile having so many joint venture companies in China. The debate is about whether China has gained anything from these companies at the cost of opening the market. You go to Beijing, instead of Beijing, most of the cars running there are from joint venture companies. Yes. You go to Shanghai, they're all Volkswagen cars, whether it's worthwhile or not. Well, the way I look at it is that aside from these foreign joint venture companies, there's also a very vibrant sector dominated by indigenous companies. right? Companies like Geely, it acquired Volvo. Think about this. This guy, Mr. Li Sufu, I think he started out at about the same time I went to the U.S. I think it's in the late 1980s or early 1990s.
Now he has
let me finish it. Yeah, he started out making refrigerators. Okay. Then he moved on to construction materials. Okay, and then he started to build cars. Now he owns Volvo. Think about it. This is an incredible story. Less than 30 years, you essentially start from nothing, right? Almost like penniless, small
like
individual.
Alibaba, the English teacher.
English teacher, yeah. Alibaba Ma Yun, Mr. Ma Yun is another great example.
Recently,
he was a high school English teacher. How many years ago? Probably like 25 years ago. Now his company has the market capitalization of God knows how many billions of dollars. It's probably the largest public companies. Yeah, one of the largest public companies in China. So these are incredible stories, and it wouldn't happen without China's opening up to the outside world, without foreign trade with the outside world, without attracting most of the FDIs, the largest amount of FDIs from the outside world. So it's an incredible story, and I hope the Mongolia will learn this lesson.
Welcome.
I think it's very inspiring stories for people being an English high school teacher, to become billionaire in such a business like a telecom business.
Exactly.
Alibaba.com.
Yeah, right.
Well, let's talk a little bit about you. I mean, how happened that you not yet all this economic changes almost just started and you went to the U.S. How it happened like
this? Okay. It's a good question. I went to the U.S. at the end of 1989. And at the time, very much like Mongolia today, it is the place to go. Bright students all go to the U.S., right? So we took these TOEFL tests, GRE tests, apply for, the best schools possible, graduate schools possible in the U.S. And that's the place to go. I think there's no reason to think otherwise. Best students in.
Well, however, how was difficult? Was it difficult?
It was.
You have been learning the language before, or how?
For me, it's okay. I think at the time, the biggest challenge is really funding. I remember I went to the U.S. with $400. That's like 90% of my parents' fortune. Their savings. $400. $400. Yeah, in pockets. I brought with me $400.
So you had no choice other than to study well.
Yeah, exactly. So I got a teaching assistant TA-ship at the time.
Okay.
So I went to I flew to San Francisco. And then I bought a ticket from San Francisco to Austin, Texas, which costed $300. So I have $100 pocket left.
And you were accepted while you were in California to the University of Texas in Austin?
No. I was accepted to University of Texas Austin before I left for China. Before I left China.
So how difficult was it at the beginning?
For me, it was okay. Not that difficult, I think. But language is not so much of a problem for me because my English is actually not bad when I graduated from high school.
You did it in Beijing?
I did it in Shanghai.
In
Shanghai. There's a middle school that is attached to Shanghai Foreign Studies University. So students.
What was the reason that you were studying there? Because your parents doing or some international work?
This goes back many years. There was actually quite competitive to get into that school. So the school will admit. I remember 40 students in Shanghai at a time, 2 classes, and they will invite selected students from all the elementary schools in Shanghai. I guess for some reason they selected me to go into that test, and I passed, and I got admitted.
Talented kid.
Thank you very much.
So you did Austin University, and then you have been working in Colorado.
Well, I first took a job with a company called Bell Communications Research in New Jersey, based in Morristown, New Jersey. The company essentially is a R&D consortium company sponsored by the regional Bell operating companies, which is called RBOX at the time. There were 6 or 7 regional Bell operating companies in this research organization. It was spun off from the from the Bell Lab system. So I worked for 7 years there, and in 2001 I left for Colorado to join Cable Television Laboratories. I don't know if you remember, in 2001 there was the telecom bubble.
Yes.
Right. A lot of dot-com companies went bankrupt. Yes. So I was one of these what's called telecom boat people. Okay. Okay. So people, the telecom industry wasn't doing well. They were laying off people. So I left, and people joke with me that Colorado and cable television are sunnier than New Jersey and telecom.
The founder of our business school in Colorado, University of Denver.
Oh yeah,
Mr. Daniels.
Right.
Yeah, that was a part of that business.
Right. Yeah, you graduated from in Denver, so we got some commonalities
Colorado
as well.
Is
yeah,
a nice place.
Hey,
I went,
Colorado.
by the way, to the U.S. Go Rockies.
Yeah, go Rockies. Yeah, go Rockies. Yeah.
First time I went to the U.S. in 1990.
I see, 1990. Okay.
Yeah, for 3 months.
So about the same time as I did.
For Phillips Petroleum in Oklahoma.
I see. Well, Oklahoma and Texas, the football rivalry, right?
How come that you have this U.S. patent for a switch board?
Oh, I see. I own about? 2 patents. Well,
2 patents. What
two,
is
two
that
patents.
About?
Well, it's about the network planning, channel lineup planning for providing a service called switched broadcast service. In other words, the rationale behind this is that as number of channels expand, a lot of channels are not being watched. Okay, so you don't need the same number of physical channels to broadcast the number of program channels. So what you do is you can do switch broadcasting. So what I did is I invented an algorithm to optimize the system to provide a better channel lineup with the least amount of capacity requirement. Essentially, that's what I did.
Yeah, and it makes almost streamlined consumer's choice. Or it's from the technical side.
It's more of a it's more of a technical side. Okay. It does good for your capacity planning.
Okay.
Yeah. You don't need as many physical channels as you need.
I see. What about the next?
The second one is about it's called the QAM resource allocation. In cable system, the spectrum provided, the cable spectrum provided to support the cable broadcasting is broken into 6 megahertz chunks. Okay. Now in video on demand service, it used to be the case that all the streams are all standard definition TV streams. Okay. As the service gets better, you start to introduce these high definition video on demand stream requests. So when you have 2 types of streams mixed together, you put on the same 6 megahertz spectrum. It's not very efficient. In other words, you may have a little bit spectrum left, which you can't put another program channel on it. Okay. So this algorithm essentially tries to avoid mixing these 2 streams. You start from the 2 sides, and
much better.
And again, the capacity is reduced.
You are more optimizing the capacity.
Exactly.
So you have registered 2 patents in the U.S.
Right.
Do you make money out of this?
No, I was the assignee. The assignee of the patents are my employer. So when I joined the company, we have to sign a employment agreement that says that any intellectual property developed through your career belongs to the company. Right. So the assignee is Cable Labs.
However, these 2 patents brought a lot economic.
I know one of them is actually actively being used. Here's something interesting. I told my kids that Daddy published a few academic papers, but I'm not so proud of these academic journal papers. Some of the journal papers are pretty good, but this one algorithm Daddy invented is actually being used in the cable system in the U.S., and I'm very proud of it.
How many kids?
I have 2 kids. I have 2 kids, yeah.
So they're proud. They are going to be an engineer like you or economist like you?
I hope, I don't know.
How old are they?
Well, in the U.S., they say I take my 5th Amendment right? I mean, I will leave it to the kids. I don't take a position. I support whatever they choose to do. I mean, what's best for them. I fully support. If they want to be pianists, that's fine. Musicians, that's fine.
You were writing in South Morning China Post and also Global Times in Hong Kong, both. You were writing weekly columns at certain time of period, and still you are very active in international journalism. How do you find the work of journalists, particular writing?
Well, it started out as something as something fun. You know, I first at the time when I was about to came back to China, and I wrote one small article and I sent it to Shanghai Daily. And I was never doing this before. I wasn't trained as a journalist. I wasn't trained as an OP writer. I was just writing it, you know. So it got published. It was accepted, and the editor came back to me and said, "Why don't you write some more?" So that's how I get started. I started to write.
What was the topic?
All kinds of topics. Mostly I write on economic, some political, some social stuffs, environmental causes. I'm more of a more of a liberal writer, I guess.
You have been changing your career dramatically.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
IT guy, communication, then the journalism, then the scientist, economist. Now you are writing research, you're doing research in macroeconomics. In your economics analysis, you were more writing about antitrust issues, and you are one of the experts when China needs in the disputes independent opinion of experts. And you were part of making solution in between Beijing Rainbow and vis-a-vis Johnson and Johnson.
Yeah, right.
Please tell us about the story.
Oh, okay, all right, okay. So this case is about a practice called retail price maintenance. In other words, a manufacturer prohibits its retailers from lowering prices. Okay. Now, according to the antitrust, anti-monopoly law in China, it is illegal, subject to a legal analysis.
To lowering?
The manufacturer is not allowed to fix the price its retailers sell to the end customers. Okay, it has certain anti-competitive effect. Okay. So in this Rainbow versus Johnson Johnson case, Johnson Johnson was selling surgery sutures for surgery. Okay, and Rainbow is one of its distributors. So at one of the hospitals in Beijing asked a couple of Johnson Johnson distributors to make bids for 1 year supply of surgery sutures. So this company bid the lowest. Rainbow, right, bid the lowest, but it's just a little bit lower than Johnson Johnson internally set the limit for the prices. So Johnson Johnson was very upset. It just cut off its distributorship for this company, and so the company sued. So my client lost the case in the first round of litigation. So in the second round, I wasn't involved in the first round. The second round, in the appeal court, so I was invited to act as an expert witness, and thank goodness we turned it around. We won the case, and it's actually interesting that it's the first lawsuit in China, the first antitrust lawsuit in China, won by a plaintiff. So there are many plaintiffs suing different companies. They all lost.
Yeah, that's very. How about the case with Samsung storage?
Oh, that's a merger request case. It's not a litigation case. It's a merger request. According to China's anti-monopoly law, multinational companies they have to file a merger approval with the anti-monopoly administration in China, which is part of the Ministry of Commerce, to review the cases. And they file these cases simultaneously in U.S. market, in China, as well as in EU market. So I was involved in the China case.
Why you were so much on antitrust?
Why was I so much antitrust? Well, I got involved in this when I first back to China, because China's anti-monopoly law was enacted in 2008. I think I remember it's in May or August of 2008.
We have a similar law here.
Similar law here,
and
okay.
Also there's antitrust and also for consumer
protection. Yeah, usually
it goes together in
here.
Yeah,
right. In a lot of countries, it's like that. The U.S. Federal Trade Commission also has these two functions together. So I got involved actually on invitations. It started out as a research project for Ministry of Commerce Antitrust Bureau.
Yes.
So I gradually got involved in this. It's uses the antitrust stuff all mainly uses industrial organization theory in microeconomics, and that's my field. So that's why I got involved in this.
You were a chief architect of the Bureau's National Competition Database Project.
That's the project I'm talking about. I got involved in this research project.
So it is a database?
Yeah, they want to develop a database to monitor different sectors of China's economy. So I was asked to design what things we should look at, right? What indexes we should look at.
So to make sure that it is competitive, it's a free competition, non-antitrust.
Right, exactly. You don't want in industry where you have too much market share by just one company.
Well, this alone is a great contribution to the economy.
I hope so. I feel flattered. Thank you very much.
Well, you have done your PhD also in Texas?
A PhD in Texas, University of Texas at Austin.
Again, and it was a different topic or than your diploma work? I mean, how much you have switched from a university and then to your PhD?
No, I graduated from the university I'm currently teaching at, University of International Business Economics in Beijing, and then I graduated and I directly went to University of Texas at Austin to join their PhD program in economics. So I was trained as an economist.
Welcome. Is China market economy?
I firmly believe so, but my opinion doesn't count. The U.S. government, the European Union.
What is the major argument they don't
otherwise?
Particularly, your argument is not counted.
Well, this has the issue of market economy is important in those anti-dumping cases. In other words, in anti-dumping cases, if you have the market economy status, they look at your cost structure and compare to the price you sell, and want to make sure that the costs are not higher than the price you sell. Okay, so if you are if you have the market economy status, they just look at the factor prices, input prices in your own country to do a calculation. If you are not, they will take a surrogate country. For example, in China, they will not look at the costs in China, but they will look at the prices of factor inputs in another country.
Similar cases?
Yeah, for example, in India or maybe it's another country, which usually have higher prices than China. And they do the calculation, and they find, the price is, the costs are a lot higher than the prices, and that meets the definition of anti-dumping. So the issue is important for China. I think the U.S. government hasn't recognized China's market economy status because I think they still want to have some control over China's exports to U.S. as a potential weapon.
This is a long-lasting issue.
Yeah, right.
And you have a quite strong position in the U.S. bond market. China has 4 trillion or 5 trillion foreign currency reserves in the U.S., right? And most of the money is actually in buying up U.S. bonds and government bonds. Government bonds, yeah. T-bonds.
Yeah, right. T-bills and bonds. And I think I would advocate to diversify into this. In other words, you don't want to put all the money into the bonds. You want to put some money into equities, right?
Well,
the government can't buy up equities. So my solution is to encourage Chinese companies to go to the U.S. to do acquisitions. And by doing this, they will have to take the local currency, which is renminbi, to the central bank to exchange for U.S. dollars and then do the acquisitions, right? In other words, let the private enterprises in China go outside of China, go international, go to U.S., go to Europe, buy up equities on the cheap. And that's the way to diversify the foreign reserve holdings they have right now. Too much, I think.
The U.S. is always saying that you have your money artificially at that level.
That's what they say. But the reason behind this is many years of Chinese export surplus with the U.S. Right. So China is still under currency control. So every surplus money made from exports has to be exchanged with the central bank to get the renminbi and put the dollar with the central bank reserves. And central bank has to put money somewhere, so that's why they put it all in the U.S. bond market.
Okay.
Yeah, so exports related.
So that's why it is still keep at this level as today.
Yeah, you're right.
Very
I think
hard
there's
to
a lot of
appreciate.
voices right now in China to look at this issue, to control this amount from further going up. You know, it's not always a good thing because it adds some inflationary pressure on China's domestic market.
Yes.
Because they have to issue renminbi, right,
Yes.
to buy back dollars from exporters.
Yes.
So too much paper money on the market
Yes.
increases inflationary pressure.
Yeah,
So
like here.
not here.
What do you think? What we can do better between China and Mongolia?
And Mongolia,
so
yeah.
the closest neighbors.
Okay. You know, I'm quite passionate about the great potential, the prospect of increased trade and FDI between these two countries. I think if you look at the trade patterns, it's entirely complementary, right? In my opinion is that for a market of 3 million people, consumers, it is very tough to make or manufacture everything. And living standards increases, you need to have manufactured goods. A lot of people are buying cars, right? Buying iPhones.
It has no sense for us to produce cars.
It doesn't make sense for Mongolia to
Yes.
produce cars. So you have to buy it from somewhere, right? So, but then you have to sell things to other countries to
Yes.
make up the influx of these manufactured goods,
Yes.
right? So, you know, who do you trade with? Well, the manufacturing center of the world is in China. What China needs raw materials, you know, minerals, you know, food, meat, cashmere, right?
Yes.
These things. So I think, you know, we should expand trade relationships with Mongolia and also
Diversify it,
Diversify, yeah. Also, and Chinese capitals also looking for investment opportunities. I think, you know, I hope Mongolia can be more accommodating to foreign direct investment from China. You know, China struggled with these issues in the 1980s and 1990s when American capital came to China. People also, you know, debate about this. You know, why do we need American capital? You know, at the time, the two countries are quite hostile, actually, right? To invest in China, is this a good thing? So, but looking back after 20 or 30 years, you know, the country is doing great. So.
You became a WTO member like we did before.
Exactly.
Which regulates us also to be very fair trader.
Exactly. So, you know, I would strongly advocate a more open, a more liberal kind of attitude towards foreign direct investment, especially from China.
Well, let it be.
Okay, great.
Well, thank you very much. You have touched the several important issues, and I think also a lot of learning points for our young people.
Thank you very much.
To follow your dream and to do your best for your country.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.